We are just about in the middle of the second paragraph on page Gimel. A little bit above the middle. The line starts with ve-tzarisch lahavim Ayin kadosh baruch. We need to understand the principle of kadosh and baruch. We see that there are certain parameters associated with it. Kadosh is something that neshamas have to initiate and malachim follow along. Baruch, malachim can do it on their own. and yet still there is a difference between the way malachim say baruch and neshamas say baruch. What is the principle of kadosh and baruch? It's known the baruch hu hamshocha min ha'helem al hagilui, that the principle of a baruch is to draw something that is already in identified, has already been bestowed, so to speak, given in its source, but now it is still in a concealed state, and it does not come forth on its own begilui, to be mashpia begilui. And baruch is to be mamshich that from helem el hagilui. So it should actually be present in the world itself. Leibe b'chinas his chachus. There is not in baruch the element of his chachus, of creating something new. Kiyim only mehahelem el hagilui levat, to draw it from a concealed state into a revealed state. The ya is being that the Ayin habracha, that what is the function of a bracha? Ein lahamshich milmayla mishorshei u'mekoiroi. The principle of bracha is not to draw something from a source that is higher than the source of this entity itself. We'll discuss in a moment. It is to draw from the source itself. We'll go and come back to this. I just want to have the entire statement. And therefore, since it is not the principle of baruch is not to draw from above the shoyrish, but to draw it from the shoyrish, just from the shoyrish, but to draw it out begilui. B'meila AyinBase his chachus. Thus, there is not anything novel in the bracha. Ki'im only k'mei shenivdat b'shorshi u'mekoire b'helem, just the way it is measured and defined in its source. Harei ze nimshach begilui. That is what's nimshach, but is drawn begilui in an expressed form. To give us a little bit of a handle on this, we would readily be able to understand this if we focus in on chochmah, how binah comes from chochmah, for example, and how chochmah comes from ratzon. Where in the ratzon, those aspects that are recognized in chochmah do not exist as such. Whereas that which is drawn from chochmah into binah, it is drawn directly from the chochmah. Except in chochmah it is in a concealed state, and in binah it comes to full expression. In fact, the whole focus of binah is to focus into the chochmah and to identify things which we sense in the chochmah, which means that it is there in the shoyrish, but we have to bring it out and identify it on our graspable level. But it's nothing new. It is there in the chochmah to start with. As a matter of fact, as we speak all the time, this meaning that it is there in the chochmah to start with is extremely important. So that when we finally do identify it, it's not like a strange thing. We relate to it in the deepest sense. It's something which we can identify with, we can relate to. Because the chochmah already contains these inyanim. But when you come to a higher koyach, like ratzon, there, none of these aspects that are ultimately identified in binah and in practice are present in the ratzon. Therefore, in order to draw from ratzon, this is like bringing something new. Bracha is, the inyan from bracha is to facilitate and to arouse that which is contained behelem should not have any obstacles, and it should flow out from helem al hagil. And this is what he says over here. Because inyan bracha is not to be mamshech milamaylo mishorshe or mekoyne, from the source which is higher than the source of this particular entity. It is rather to draw it from the shoyrish itself, and therefore this is not a hischachus. Just like we explained in binah, the principle of binah is not to draw that graspable entity from the neshama itself or from the ratzon. It is to draw it from the place where it is already contained, it's already present, which is in the chochmah. This is the shoyrish. Chochmah is the shoyrish of binah. And that's in habracha, to permit that which is contained in the shoyrish to be drawn a begil. And the reason we need the bracha for that, and which we'll discuss, is that on the coming big gilui, there are special obstacles, special objections, special challenges. We know it simply from practical living, that we can clearly identify with a certain truth, with a certain activity, and we make a decision to go for it. When it comes to going for it, there is another mountain to climb, another bridge to cross. Because in order to draw it on hagilui, it is not enough to sense that, yes, I see that this is the truth. To draw it on hagilui, there has to be the sense that this is not, they speak many times, this is not my truth, this is the truth. This is the reality itself. This is how it can come with gilui. For this you need a bracha. There will be no obstacles, nothing should interfere with the hamshach. So therefore, although in a bracha there is no hischachus, it is It is of extreme necessity, and it has great function, great service. Okay. As is known in the phenomenon of Yankiv's bracha to Ephraim and Menashe. Ephraim and Menashe were two sons of Yosef that were born in Mitzrayim. And Yosef took them that Yankiv should bless them. And Yankiv, Menashe was the older of the two. And the older of the two, by right and by appropriate recognition, the older, the B'choyer, should have primary recognition, and the Ephraim should have a secondary recognition. Yankiv put his hands upon them, so he put his right hand on Ephraim and the left hand on Menashe. When Yosef brought them towards Yankiv, he brought them in a way that his right hand should be towards Menashe, and his left hand should be towards Ephraim. And Yankiv crossed his hands, seeking his yoder. He brought special wisdom into these hands that they should go the other way. So the question is why? Yankiv said, I know that he is the B'choyer, but Ephraim deserves, yes, this baruch, because he has this kind of, this is what he has in his shoulders. This is what we see when Shiomar, but Yankiv said, Gam hu yiyul yom, that he too, Menashe, will be a nation. Just to make things a little bit more reasonable, the principle was that Yankiv had a difficulty in sight. His eyesight was not very clear. Therefore, Yosef interpreted Yankiv's act as an error. But he thought that he was actually put his right hand on Menashe. This is what Yosef tried to correct. And Yankiv answered to Yosef, no, you're right, even you died, I know. And he said, Gam hu yiyil yom, that he too, Menashe, will be a two nation, and he also will be great. For Ulam, and yet, Ochiv hakot and yidam imenu, his younger brother will be greater than him. So now the question is, why did he not go ahead and affect by his bracha that it should be in a different way than the way it was before? He's going to give him a bracha, and the correct status, relationship, Menashe should have a primary bracha. So therefore, he should have been the bracha brought upon Menashe this higher thing, and yet he didn't do it. He should have been the bracha. He should have affected that it should be different than it was before. The kedem habracha, because before the bracha Ephraim godel, Ephraim was greater. And Yankiv should have a yifoy bin birchoset, and he should affect by his bracha she Menashe godel. That Menashe should be the greater one. The harei, since that mitzad oirei soy poruhu, from the ultimate perspective of ultimate possibility, from oirei soy v'yochel li is hakol, everything is possible to be. Everything is possible. There's nothing that is restrictive mitzad Ayin Soy. That it has to be in a certain way that was already defined. As we find, even in such things, that were already imprinted in the nature here below, established here in the world in a perfectly natural manner. Therefore, this is the only way the world can really relate to it. And yet, now they can still change. As we have the story by Hanina ben Beis. Hanina ben Beis had a daughter, and she needed to ben shliach, and she did not have oil, and she had only vinegar. So Hanina ben Beis said, "Mi she'omar l'shem v'yadlik, yem l'chemetz v'yadlik." The one who said that the oil should burn should now say that the chochmah, that the vinegar should burn. Shezehu mitzad shinui hatzirufim. Which means that at that point, yoimar, there should be a fundamental change in the function and the nature of the chochmah. Yoimar, that Hashem should say that the chochmah should burn. It is not something that you can draw in the chochmah from its own nature and its own source. But he should say it. That this is by changing the tzirufim, changing the conjugations of the word, so that it actually has the inyan from yadlik. The kfi hateva, for according to the nature, shem and delik umayim v'chemetz ein delik. With the word v'chemetz. From teva, the natural, the way things are set up in the world, shem and delik, oil burns. Mayim v'chemetz ein delik. Water and vinegar do not burn. This is the way it is in the teva ha'olam. Because in teva ha'olam, it is already contained in a certain form, in a certain level. And therefore, if it should burn, it should be because of what it is within the worldly definition. And therefore, there's no such thing as water burnt. Mitzad Ayin soy baruch. But from the perspective of Ayin soy baruch, from the Meibasher's perspective, there could be shinui hatzirufim, a change in the conjugations of the letters. Shegam chochmah yadlik, that chochmah also should burn. Clearly, this is a phenomenal thing. That the way things are in the nature of the world are clearly not restrictive. Lamayla, chochmah yadlik. Chochmah can also burn, changing the entire presence of chochmah, its nature, so to speak. The principle that I want to expose over here in a certain sense, this chochmah yadlik is even a greater phenomenon than Kriyas Yamsuf, for example. And the Alter Rebbe explained that the Kriyas Yamsuf, the water were made to stand contrary to their nature. But the effect of a powerful wind that, so to speak, blew into the waters and lifted the waters up and then kept them standing. Alter Rebbe says that if this wind should have ceased for a moment, the water will continue to flow. In other words, it was not an intrinsic change in the water, in the nature of water. Change in the water, all of a sudden the Yam is standing. But here, the chochmah itself is burning. It's a phenomenal thing. The principle that we need to, yes, there's absolutely no minimizing it, and there's no way that we can bewonder it more than it is. It's a godly wonder. The point that we ought to relate to understand that the world as we have it, as we observe it, and as we experience it, is in a constant state of being recreated. There is nothing restrictive on the part of the Creator that the world is in one way or another. Like we said yesterday, if you remember, about that when you do a mitzvah, the Rebbe is doing the mitzvah together with you. And the Rebbe is the one who is making the tzitzis into tzitzis by your effort. But if you take something from the world, it's not tzitzis. So that if oil burns, it is not due to the fact that yesterday the oil was able to burn. Oil burns because right now the Rebbe says that the oil should burn. Should have that teva to burn. In the worldly context, it looks like teva, because this is a teva. The Baal Shem Tov says means something which occurs repetitively in a totally smooth manner that you don't observe any changing phenomena. But mitzad and Ayin Seif, from the perspective of Ayin Seif, there is nothing restricted. That in oil, that the chochmah could be given that property to burn. As a matter of fact, the oil is currently has that property because it's being given that property at this moment. This is the Tzirufi. So this is the Inyan that it's possible that mitzad Philo, mitzad Gzeres, mitzad Milmaila, there could be a complete change in the Teva. There's absolutely no restrictions. And that's why Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa said, Mi she'omar l'shemen v'yadik, yeimar l'chochmah v'yadik. Yoimar means he should make the statement, he should create a new aspect in the chochmah that he should burn. All right, this will be it for this morning. Okay, this is it. Good morning. Have a good day.
So Barad was a greater miracle than Kriyas Yamsuf?
What?
In the sense, Barad, where the nature of the ice and fire, they were mixed together. They didn't cancel each other out. That was an intrinsic change.
it's still not comparable to the chochmah itself. Water means water combines with fire, and they should affect each other, and they won't affect each other. They made peace.
Mm-hmm. The frogs jumping into the oven.
See this nefesh.
Binah discovers in chochmah something that binah is already has. And it already has the components that chochmah has. It's only revealing it within itself. So these are new. It's not that. So binah is getting new things from chochmah that it does not have.
It discovers it in chochmah.
It discovers it in chochmah. Okay.
Chochmah is a source.
Okay. So it's kind of what binah has. It receives from chochmah. So you also gave the example of ratzon.
Okay, here.
This koach makifi. The relation there we're relating binah to ratzon or chochmah to ratzon.
Either one.
Either. So
Sure, still going on. Still recording. But over here,
they don't have this discovery process that binah has for chochmah. It doesn't. They cannot find in ratzon.
Carry on.
Chochmah comes from ratzon as a new thing, as a spark. Coming from nowhere.
And this is not the relationship of binah to chochmah.
No.
Called instinct and intellect.
Right, I saw
And then where the associated movements is underneath all the full shear or whatever. Click here. That puts you in the Dropbox and just click download.
There's no relationship
I just saw this
of binah or chochmah to ratzon.
It's like, I don't know exactly what it
Right,
is.
not in direct
It's like the
relation.
two main topics so far. One is some sikha about carrying on. The second one is
Okay.
instinct. And that is
Okay, I'll look again.